After decades of memories, are you wondering what's next? Selling your home is emotional, complex, and life-changing. And yet, you've taken the first step. Welcome to the official Bay Area Home Selling Workshop. You're among people just like you, ready for change, curious, and cautious. You're now part of a trusted team, guided by a lead with over 30 years of real estate experience, equipping you with everything from legal essentials to market-smart strategies. This isn't just another seminar. It's your launch pad to clarity, confidence, and the next chapter. We're so glad you're here. Let's begin.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining online here, and for people in person. Just want to welcome you to the official Bay Area Home Selling Workshop. So our goal today really is just to educate and really get across the fact that this seminar is really just for information. We're here to try to be your Sherpa, try to keep you knowledgeable and insightful when it comes to the idea of selling your home. So with today, just introducing and kind of going over a few things that we're going to be tackling today is really just the complications and hurdles of selling, right? So we're going to be looking at timing, preparing, identifying trusted professionals to work with, like your contractors, your title officers, getting the photos ready, everything like that. And we're also going to go over the costs and lastly, tax consequences coming in. So of course, we're going to try to tackle everything that we can for you today. But the main thing is please ask questions. We've got the comment section and we're happy to tackle anything. And we also have a Q&A at the end of the day as well. So just a little bit of a background on kind of our team and what we do, right? We've been around for a few generations coming across. So myself, I'm a third generation real estate agent. Grandpa started the business around here. Our fearless leader, Keith, he's also second generation and leads everything that we have. So the rest of our team here is really just an extension of ourselves. We've got great backgrounds across the board, whether it's from business, psychology, interior design, past contractors, all of those types of things across the board, just to make sure that we can help give you the knowledge that we're looking for and everything like that. So going into what we're going to be covering today. So to start off, we're going to have understanding current market trends and conditions. Next, we're going to check out, do you have to pay for buyer's agents anymore? Then we're going to tackle buy first or sell first, then move into tax benefits and protections, then essential home preparation tips, which home improvements maximize interest, disclosures and inspections, really how important are they? The step-by-step process of selling and effective marketing strategies. And lastly, when is the best time to sell? So like I said, we're going to have a Q&A at the end, but hopefully we tackle most of the things that you're looking for today to get those questions answered. Just one request that we do ask is if you do find this informative or helpful, please share it with people. We have past recordings across the board. We're always happy to talk in person, continue this conversation at an actual coffee shop or anything like that. So let's get started and really hop into Bay Area market trends, right? So really understanding the current state of the real estate market and what we have going on. So if we're hopping into January 2026, the main thing that we really want to share across the board is that there's nothing shocking or too sexy about the market right now. It's really healthy, and that's a good sign from what we've been seeing from the past few years, especially everybody getting a little bit acquainted to that craziness that we saw about the actual pandemic coming across and prices really rising. So we're seeing things ease out a little bit. So if we're going to go into specific numbers here, the average sales price is up year over year for the third year in a row, right? So we're looking at 2025 really seeing a modest level of appreciation, but appreciation nonetheless, which is really important across the thing. So with inventory growing 20% at the start of the year, which is normal for this time, by the way, we're also seeing that pending sales have risen about 30%, right? And so that's what we're seeing across the board. And as a matter of fact, this is actually the very highest inventory that we've seen to start the year in 3 total years. So this is actually really encouraging for home buyers at the same time, which is creating demand for us one way or another. So now going into a little bit as well, kind of hopping into pending sales. So we've also seen pending sales at their highest in 3 years, which as our purchase applications at the same time. So funny enough, I was actually just talking to a mortgage broker that we work with, and he was mentioning that they actually had one of the single highest days of people applying for mortgages. So that's a really good sign that we're starting to see this pent up demand one way or another. overall, with everything that we're seeing there, it's a nice and balanced market for both buyers and sellers, right? So which we don't often see here in the Valley. Typically, we're going to see a absorption rate usually around 60%, and that usually equates to like what we're going to see with sellers market in the Bay Area. So what we're looking at right now for that absorption rate is we're starting off the year at around 40%, which means just a little less than 1 out of 2 homes are actually being sold. So in a seller's market, of course, we're a little bit more past that, and that's typically what we're going to see there. At the end of the year, what we did is we actually ended with an absorption rate around 50%, which means once again, 1 out of 2 homes we're buying. So as we ramp up the new year, we'll probably start to see that increase quite a bit. Any questions across the board with that? So with mortgage rates hovering around the 6s right now is what we're expecting going into the new year. It's been a huge relief overall from the last couple of years or few years, which we've been seeing a 7 to 8% situation, right? So what we're looking at that is, if you really think about it, that's about a 25% cheaper kind of cost of purchase. And so that's really getting buyers antiquated with the whole situation and seeing them having a little bit more confidence coming into the market. One thing to really consider across that board as well is that a lot of buyers in our area are also past sellers, right? And so we've had a lot of that pent up inventory that we're missing a little bit because we have that rate lock with sellers and waiting for them to flow into that next point of the market. So just hopping into that as well, kind of going into 20% inventory up for the year, 30% pendings up, right? So a lot of people are looking at the headlines, and whether it's fear mongering or clickbait, one of the common things that we're seeing right now is a lot of people talking about record low sales, right? Record low sales in the Bay Area, record low sales across the actual nation for one part or another. And what I really want to hone in on that, why that is a little bit misleading, is because we have less sales than we've had on average. And the main reason being is we just don't have a whole lot of inventory, right? So without that inventory, we're not able to have sales. But as I referred to earlier, is when we're looking at the difference in active inventory versus pendings, right? We're starting to see that kind of bridge the gap a little bit more. So the homes that are actually coming on for the limited inventory that we have, right? Those homes are still being bought up, which is a sign of a positive and healthy market at the time. The next thing is we're going to look at a spike in foreclosures, right? This is really becoming clickbait across the board. About 20% spike in foreclosures, everything like that. That is mainly due to the moratorium being lifted on FHA loans this year. So this is a pretty normal increase in that scenario of what we're typically seeing. And it's still 40% lower than pre-pandemic rates, right? So, and if we think back to the pandemic, right, there was no concern about an actual foreclosure process around then. So we'd have a long, long way to go before foreclosures actually become any type of concern in the market that we're looking for, looking ahead. So simply put, there's not really a contingent of distressed sellers on the market one way or another. So the big picture, I think the thing that we really want to drive home at this point is exploit slow and steady this year, right? Rates are going to fluctuate as always, and be prepared for that Silicon Valley effect. And so it's always interesting because we can come into this year, people are expecting, probably 4 to 5% of appreciation in our area. But as we've seen in the past and our experience, that can definitely accelerate quite fast depending on what's going on. And I think a big drive home point here is that we're going to see that pent up buyer demand possibly become a factor in this case. And if that rate lock starts to tighten up a little bit, we'll start to see a lot of those sellers move forward and inventory also increase. So as the seller, the main thing to really drive home here is a well-presented, well-priced homes are moving, right? So if you're thinking about selling, especially if you're sitting in that like low rate financing and high equity, just know the sales data and trends well before actually jumping into the market at this point. All in all, there's really no reason to panic, and I think that's an important aspect here. So very drive home point is the underlying housing dynamics are strong. We're just seeing, once again, clickbait fear across the board. So it's all about supply and demand. Watch the inventory and absorption rate, and you can always follow our markets up on YouTube as well, just to kind of get the up to date on what's going on. Of course, the one thing that we always have to note is there are microclimates, right? So it's going to be very different if you're considering selling a home right in the center of Mountain View, in the center of Sunnyvale or things like that, right? Cupertino with good schools versus kind of like those outlying neighborhoods. Typically, when we see market change, and a lot of the time what we see that happens with buyers is when rates change, it doesn't have to be a massive change or anything like that. Whenever we see those slight changes in rates, that's when we see actually the change in market activity and velocity. So just always consider that location is going to be the most important thing here. So with all of that on the market, I just want to let everybody know, make sure you stay tuned to the end. We'll let you know how to stay connected, figure out all the market updates that we're putting out, and just general tips and tricks for sellers. So without ado, I'm going to toss it over to Shannon. She actually has a great story following just market data and what we're seeing across the board.
So thank you, Chris. Perfect. All right. I wanted to share a quick story because it piggybacks off of the market that Chris was talking about. And this puts us back into the shoes of the March 2025 market and all of the tariffs that we were experiencing back then. We had some lovely sellers over in the De Anza Oaks community in Cupertino, and they had to put their house on the market right when the tariffs hit. So the biggest thing I want to drive home here is not panicking despite what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the market out there. They did get an offer after about 2 to 3 weeks on the market. It was lower than they expected. And we said, wait it out. Don't accept it. We don't want to panic sell. And by waiting, they were able to secure that original buyer at a higher price than they originally offered just by waiting and not panicking. So take our advice and you'll have success. Next, we're going to talk about buyers and do they really have to pay the commission? And ever since August of 2024, when the laws changed, we've had some time to see how this really plays out in real life and real offer scenarios. And the basic thing we've seen is we just can't advertise to the public anymore what you as a seller are willing to pay a buyer agent for bringing a qualified offer. What we can do is say, hey, we're open to offering concessions, and then just look at each offer that comes in and what you net from each to decide which one's going to be the best for you. It's up to the buyer agent to negotiate their fee to be either paid by the buyer or the seller. But I just want to bring it back to when you first purchased your home in the Bay Area or anywhere in the Silicon Valley. It was probably a financial stretch to be able to buy something. And now imagine if you had to come up with an extra $25,000 to $50,000 on top of your down payment money to be able to afford a buyer's agent. You probably would have been able to offer a lot less on your home. So as a seller, it's actually beneficial in most cases to offer to pay the buyer's agent fee. You're probably going to net more on the offers that come in. Next, if there's any questions on that, we can take them now. Good. All right, next is buying or selling first. And this is a conundrum a lot of sellers face when they're making that transition. And it's really just about convenience or certainty. Buying first has pros and cons, and selling first has pros and cons. And we just take it case by case based on your goals, and we advise from there. So buying first, you might need a bridge loan. Sometimes it's the more expensive route, but it can be less stress. You already have that place to live. You've moved out of your home. You're not in this unknown interim place. You can allow your current house that you're selling to be vacant. It can be staged. You don't have to deal with showings and exiting the home when buyers want to come take a look at your house. So a little bit easier if you're buying first. Again, those bridge loans can have a more expensive interest rate attached to them. But again, you get that certainty. Selling first, the pro is you know exactly how much you have to spend on your next home, but you might need to negotiate a rent back where you can stay in that current home to give you a little bit of time to figure out where that next house is that you want to purchase. And we have lenders that can do it all, bridge loan or not, departing residence loans. There's a few options out there, but connect with us afterward and we can refer you the right lender that makes the most sense for your particular situation. If there's no questions on that, I'm going to hand it back to Chris to talk about some tax benefits.
All right. Let's get this to come back. There we go. All right, so let's talk about the fun stuff, right? We've got tax benefits across the board. I'm glad to see you smiling over there. So with tax benefits, I do have to preface at the same time that I'm not an accountant, right? So always refer to your accountant to like really get a strategy based off of your situation across the board. The things that really made a difference, especially for home sellers when it came to taxes and everything, were a couple of propositions that we had. So we had 60, 90, and 19. And so they really all built upon each other to start becoming a better factor for most people. So a couple things to consider with these, at least to start off, this is mainly for people that are sellers departing their residence, right? Trying to buy a home, trying to avoid that whole idea that they got landlocked a little bit because prices grew so much. And maybe you bought your home at $100,000, $500,000, right? And you want to keep those property taxes. So when 60 came out, what that really did, which said, hey, if you sell your home and you buy a new home, right, you're going to be able to carry that property tax basis over within the county, right? So if you bought another home within the county, you're going to be able to carry that over. Now, a couple caveats to this that we really check out and look at is that if it's at equal value, right, it's clean, right? You're able to keep that same basis. Everything carries over really, really convenient. Now, if you were to buy over, say you had $1 million house that you purchased and then you bought a $2 million property, you're going to be able to keep that basis for that $1 million of that purchase price, but then the additional $1 million, right? That's where we're going to see adjusted on those property taxes. So you still get a good discount when it comes to those. So now when Prop 90 came into effect, really, they just realized, okay, within county, that might be a little unrealistic. People are moving away, those types of things. And so they expanded it, right? And so they are able to do it inter-counties between California and overall. And carried the same basis, everything like that. But then what they did was they really became all-encompassing and brought Proposition 19 across, right? So the things that they added about tax basis with Proposition 19, right, was essentially that you can do this up to 3 times now. So, you could sell your house, move up to 3 times and still carry that basis over. But it also included like severely disabled, victims of wildlife and natural disasters. So think of in LA, all those homes that burned down, right? It really let people keep that property tax basis over to them. So that just became a much easier position for a lot of people that were landlocked to start to move and make those changes. So remember, again, if you buy something pricier, you will pay additional taxes, but we see people kind of making those lateral movements across the Bay Area one way or another. So with that, we will work into capital gains. So when we're going into capital gains, we got the numbers and everything like that. So a couple things that people usually confuse capital gains with is a 1031 exchange. And so I'm happy to talk about that outside of this and really dive into the details, but just to put it across the board, 1031 is mainly for investment properties. That doesn't apply to your actual personal residence. And it's essentially just a way for you to get a free loan from the government, right? If you continue to buy investment properties from the one that you're selling. So with how capital gains protection works is whether you're single or you're filing jointly, right? So if you're single, you get $250,000 of capital gains protection. If you're married, or like I said, filing jointly, you get $500,000 of capital gains protection. So how does that really work? So essentially, let's say you bought a home for $1 million, you sold a home for $2 million, right? Normally we'd be paying, capital gains on that $1 million, right? So now with those protections, if we're married, right, we're only actually paying capital gains now on $500,000 because we have an additional buffer, right? And otherwise it would be $750,000 if you were single. So that's typically how that's going to work. So a lot of people are going to ask, right, how are capital gains actually put together? How's the math work, right? So realistically, we have those initial protections, but the beauty of it is that anything that you've also done to the home, right? Improvements, you improved the kitchen, right? You did landscaping, cost of sale as well, right? You had to get inspections, anything like that, your real estate commissions, all of those things get included into the cost of sale. So that starts building on top of that taxable basis. So today, with improvements, commissions, everything like that, costs you $150,000. that's going to be added on top of that $250,000 or $500,000 that we're getting with those capital gains. So that's typically how that's going to work. This rolls us next into also a step-up basis. And so moving on from that whole capital gains and math, we have the step-up basis. And really how that works is it's a little bit of a sensitive topic because it does have to deal with like a partner passing away, right? But with how this works is what they were able to take is, say you bought your home in 1990 and your spouse passes away in 2010. What will actually happen is now at the point that the spouse had passed away is that becomes your step-up basis. So now whatever the property was worth at that time, right, at the spouse passing away, that is now the new base level for where capital gains works. So it gives you a lot more protection on those points. This one's always fun because we actually had some clients. I can remember a little while back and we were very surprised at the same time of like what was happening. And so we were working with a couple, they were selling their house and they came across and we're kind of running the final notes of sale. And we realized this whole step-up process was missed. And so their accountant apparently wasn't aware, hadn't told them anything about this. And because we were able to kind of chat with them and move through, right? We were able to end up saving them about $700,000 in taxes. So this can really, really make a huge difference when it comes to your taxable basis and everything like that. So does anybody have any questions on that? I know that can get a little complicated at some points. No? Perfect. And anybody online as well, feel free to throw those up at any time. But with that, I'm going to toss it back over to Shannon and she's going to talk about essential home preparation tips.
Thank you, Chris. Exciting stuff. All right, let's make sure it's not too zoomed in. There we go. Awesome. All right, so next we're talking about prepping your home for sale. And this is exciting. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the whole selling process. And there are 3 different strategies, really, when we sit down and we talk with sellers at that very first consultation. And it's, do we want to sell as is? Do we want to sell at that mid-range point? Or do we want to do that full-blown remodel? And there's no right or wrong answer here. It just depends on your situation, your finances, and how much time you have before you want to put your house on the market. So as is really just doing really basic cleanup, doing a deep clean, maybe cleaning up the front yard, taking the weeds out of the back, not too much. This is going to be your quickest route to market if you're working in a tight time frame or if you just don't have the finances to prep the home in a big way before going on the market. Then you have a mid-range. And mid-range is what people like to refer to as lipstick on a pig. And you're doing things like refinishing the floors, putting some paint. Maybe you're doing a countertop in the bathroom or the kitchen, painting the cabinets, or maybe just hardware on the cabinets. But just mid-range things, sometimes this is the best bet instead of doing a full-blown remodel because it doesn't take as much time and it doesn't take as much money. Then for people that have time and they have the finances, maybe that full-blown remodel is the best bet for them to get the most money out of the house. Sometimes this is the best bet. Like I said, none of these are right or wrong. They just depend on your specific situation, your time, your finances. A story I like to share here is a lovely family over in Blossom Valley. The daughters were helping their very old 90-year-old mother sell the house. She did not have time or finances to do a full-blown remodel or really the mid-range. So we just did floors. We refinished the floors. We didn't even put new floors in. And that alone with a deep cleaning really just made the house shine. I don't think we even staged it. So I would say that's more of a as is mid-range. And they were able to get some fantastic results. And that was the best solution for them in their time and finances. So if you're thinking about, okay, maybe I do have some time to do some fixes and some updates, where should I spend my money to get the best bang for my buck? And this is which ones are going to maximize interest. The most cost-effective is usually the mid-range, paint, floor, countertops, like I said, and curb appeal. Don't neglect the front yard. Remember, this is the first thing that buyers see when they pull up to the house. So curb appeal is so important. You want to get them into the house. So mow the lawn, clean up that garden, maybe plant some flowers, make sure it looks nice from the street. Put your trash cans on the side of the yard. It does make a difference. And then your kitchen, of course, is going to be the big one. Kitchen and bath. Kitchen is where people gather. They entertain in the kitchen. So the kitchen, especially for, we know the certain party that makes the decisions and any purchase, right? The kitchen is going to be so important for a lot of people. And then if you're thinking, okay, I have a certain amount of money, which bathroom should I do? Should I do both? Well, if there's an important one, it's going to be the primary because that's where the owner of the home is living in the bathroom that they're going to be using. One key factor to remember, you're always going to be compared to your competition that's on the market and the recently sold homes. So make sure your agent is looking at those homes and want to see how you compare to those homes. Not just, remember, not just the solds, but the actives on the market as well. Those are going to be the houses that those buyers are out there touring at the same time as yours is on the market. That's what they'll be comparing with. And again, all of this can vary house by house. If you want to get a breakdown of each option, of course, it's going to be case by case, but connect with us afterwards and we can go through your specifics and advise for that. One more story that I want to share is Gary. This is a really powerful story. He had a home in, what was that? Okay. We have someone here in the audience. Camera's working? Okay. Gary was an amazing client. So he lived over in Blossom Valley and he was in a situation where everything that he had was in this house. So this sale was so important to him. Everything that he could get was going to be the last bit for him. He didn't have a retirement. He had nothing else to lean on. So this sale was of utmost importance. And he had received multiple offers and talked to different agents before he had met with us. Luckily, when he did end up going with us, we were able to get him 124% of the list price within 5 days of being on market. That's an extra $250,000 on top of the offers that he was getting from those other agents to just sell it quick off market. So convenience is not always the answer. Sometimes just doing simple things like we did for him, some yard work and a deep clean. He was one of those as-is sales. He was able to get an extra $250,000 in his pocket, which is life-changing for his situation. So just know your options and make sure you're interviewing multiple agents to make sure you're going with the right fit. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris.
Beautiful. Thank you, Shannon. And that's always let me get that camera back over here. And that's always a great story, honestly, because, things get tight and they go pretty fast in the real estate market. And it's always feels good to kind of see it actually work out from somebody and make a life-changing situation. So the next thing that we're going to be moving into here is actually the most fun thing here, which is disclosures and everything about that and the importance of disclosures and inspections, right? So when it comes to disclosures, right, across the board it's really an important factor to think of. What we're doing is we're really just sharing everything that we can about the house itself, right? So we have the TDS, SPQ. All that really matters here is that as a seller, we're taking anything that we materially know about the home, past updates, any issues, right? Insurance claims, things like that, right? We just want to make sure that that comes across the board. So the good news is typically in the Silicon Valley, inspections are provided up front, right? And a big importance factor to that is, like we were referring to earlier, our market tends to be in a seller's market like 70+% of the time. And so what does that mean? You might ask. Realistically, what's going on there is just means that we're getting multiple offer scenarios. Most of the offers that are accepted in these situations, right, tend to be the non-contingent offers. So when a buyer comes to write a non-contingent offer, right, they want to make sure that they know everything about the house as possible. And it comes down to really a educated risk that they're taking, right? So now we're going to flip that on the seller side, right? Understanding what a buyer is looking for and everything like that. When it comes to the seller, we want to avoid any friction, right, from somebody writing, because we want to look and try to get the highest and best offer that we can with the most favorable terms across the board. So these are all really important aspects to understand when it comes to actually making sure that we disclose everything that we know about, right? So the most important factor that comes down to as well is really the factor of protection, across the board. So there's, of course, things that are layered like into the actual contract itself. But the reason with the specifics about protection is we just want to make sure if anything is found that we didn't disclose, right, that gives the buyer the chance to, one, come after you, right? And we want to avoid that. Everybody in California already loves to sue each other, so let's try to keep that away at the same time. But the other importance too is even if we receive a non-contingent offer, right, and the buyers end up doing some additional inspections and they can show something that we were aware of that we didn't state in those disclosures, it actually gives them 3 additional days of contingencies, in which case they can renegotiate, they can back out of the deal, anything like that, right? So if we really bring that all together as a seller, once again, we just want to make sure we have everything possible up front, anything that we can, so that we can receive those offers and be able to move forward without any worries of renegotiation down the line. Get that strongest and best when we get into that offer situation, and start following up with everybody there. So once again, that really avoids future discoveries and things like that. Now, the one caveat to this is, right, as you purchase is an as in sale. Maybe you don't know something, right? We don't always know what's going on behind the walls of our house. But with that in mind, is if we have no contingencies, the buyers go do further inspections, it was something that we genuinely didn't know about, right? That is not something that we're liable for. So to keep that into mind. So really, moral of the story here is just don't be hesitant. Be sure to disclose. If you're not sure whether you should disclose it, you probably should. And the funny thing that we see all the time, a typical agent in a lot of senses will actually provide their seller just the disclosures to fill out themselves. This is a huge, huge, huge red flag. If you have an agent that says, hey, here are the disclosures, please fill those out, that's a no-go. Big reason there is because you don't know how to fill those out properly anyways, right? And once again, that can put you in a difficult legal position, right? And that's going to avoid any situations like that. So driving that home, the number one reason why things fall out of contract there is always because of non-disclosure, new discoveries, things like that. So it's something that we want to take very important across the board. Okay, this actually brings up a really good story that we remember. This was a few years back. And so we had a seller that we were working for. They were over in West San Jose. And it was funny because, you know, we felt like something may have been a little off, but we tried to get everything that we could from the seller. We had everything that we were aware of. We presented the house. We ended up selling it for a good price. All was good. So we think all was good until we find out 6 months later, we're receiving some legal proceedings. And so we're like, well, what could that be, right? So what had actually happened is the buyers had started digging into the house. They started to do some work. And at the end of the day, they found out that there were things that were taken care of by the past sellers that they must have known. And so they were able to prove this. And the moral of the story here is they ended up having to pay a $250,000 settlement because of that situation. So don't hide things. Make sure you're transparent with the real estate agent. Make sure you're disclosing. You're going to be able to avoid these things that you're costing yourself more money than the money you're trying to save up front. So something important across the board there. So once again, if a realtor tells you not to worry about it, big red flag, definitely don't do that. So with that, I'm going to ship it off back over to Shannon, and we're going to talk about the simple step-by-step process for the seller flow chart. There you go.
Thank you, Chris. Good stuff. Remember, it's our job to keep you guys out of court. Right? Gotta get us back in camera here.
Just do a quick handle. There we go.
There we go. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to turn your attention over here to the screen. And we're going to start at the very beginning of where every seller starts, and that is interviewing realtors. And you're interviewing with intention here. This is not a process that you should rush, and you want to make sure you're interviewing apples to apples. You want to make sure you're interviewing based on what you want in service. If you're looking for the cheapest, quickest route, you're going to find discount agents out there or limited service agents. But you're also going to find agents like us that are what we call full service or white glove service. So when you're interviewing, make sure you're interviewing with intention and comparing apples to apples on the service that you're actually going to receive. Decide on strategy. So we talked a little bit about this earlier with the 3 levels, Are you going as is, mid-range, or those full-blown remodels? Decide on what strategy is going to be the best fit for your situation. Then you want to establish the market price and your timeline. So timeline is going to come from knowing how long that strategy you're choosing is going to take you. Are you doing as is and you're going to be on the market in 2 to 3 weeks? Are you going to do a mid-range and be on in 4 weeks? Or are you doing a full-blown remodel and you need more like 6 weeks to 2 months? Like I said, none of them is the wrong decision, but establish that timeline and then the price. So we look at the market and the comparables when we first sit down and strategize. Time passes between that meeting and when you actually go on the market. So we're paying attention the whole entire time, whether you're in the market in 2 weeks or 3 months. A lot can happen in that time frame. So we wait until when we're deciding on price, on where to list, we wait till the day before we go on the market and look at what's happening in the market at that particular time. And then if we need to adjust our list price accordingly, we can do it so we're right in line with the market. Next is we're ordering all of those necessary inspections. We want to figure out what's going to come up beforehand so that we can fix those things that might be red flags for buyers before we head onto the market. Performing any upgrades or repairs. We're going to find out a lot of those things from inspection reports, which is why we have that beforehand. And then after we decide what repairs to do, maybe there's some that need to be done, maybe some we can leave to the buyer. We're going to decide which one of those are important and which ones might really affect value. Like if we find foundation issues, maybe repair those things before we hit the market. Next, we're completing all of the disclosures. So if you have a realtor that hands you a pack of papers and says, here's all the seller disclosures, fill them out and give them back to me when you're done, big red flag. We want to make sure we sit down and we fill out those disclosures with you so that you're not using any terminology or language that could put you into court. Next is staging and video and photos. All of the marketing is going to happen the week before we hit the market. Typically, we'll do video, photo, all professional on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then over the weekend, we have our marketing team put together the beautiful package. And by Monday or Tuesday, we have an amazing website, a whole photo, a video that showcases the lifestyle of the home and what it's like living in that neighborhood, not just this house is a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,500 square feet. We're showcasing the lifestyle in that video. And that marketing is so, so important. And then we go on the MLS midweek. Typically, we don't want to go on a Monday or a Friday. We want to go right on in midweek. And there's a strategy behind that as well. We want to give any homes that were on the market the week before that have offer deadlines enough time to pass early in the week, but still be on early enough to be able to hit our open houses on Thursday and Friday. So typically we'll go on a Wednesday or Thursday. And then I'm going to hand it back over to Chris to finish up with the last section of our flowchart.
All right. Thank you, Shannon, for tackling that. Let's come back over here. There we go. So yeah, let's finish out this entire actual process of what's going on. So we're going to move now into open houses themselves, right? So with open houses, I think the main takeaway here is just make your home available outside of the normal hours that other open houses are available. I know this can be inconvenient, but I mean, if you're doing it right, your home is likely going to sell in 1 to 2 weeks. So just taking that little extra time to have those extra open houses is really important across the board. So for example, do a Thursday, Friday open house, right? Saturday and Sunday, extend it from 12 to 5. So you just have an extra hour buffer on each side for those stragglers or people that weren't able to fit in all the open houses. That's all really important. And I know when it comes to the neighbors too, try to get them over to your open house. They get to choose their own neighbors in this case, right? So they may actually help bring buyers into your house, all things considered. That gives me a really fun story. We actually had this group of clients. It was 4 or 5 of them over the span of 2 years. And as homes popped up in the neighborhood that we were helping them get into, which was Rivermark over in Santa Clara, they were able to pretty much buy houses all around each other. So they had a group of like 5 friends living together. So pretty amazing story across the board there. Then we're going to move on to really most important part here is walking into offers, right? So this is a point where we really want to like trust but verify. We're taking offers in, we're calling, we're verifying with lenders, right? Because once we get ready to get into this negotiation standpoint, we really want to make sure that everybody can do what they say they can do on paper, right? And maybe the price is going to go up. So maybe we see really strong terms with certain offers, but they're not at that price that we're looking for. So we want to see if they're capable of doing that if we're handing out counter offers, those types of things, right? So it's become, unfortunately, a much more common practice in the Bay Area for real estate agents just to take the highest and best offer they have. And in reality, we're really leaving some money on the table there. We're even tossing away people that might be a better buyer candidate for your home at the same time. So try to avoid that when we have these situations. And this has happened even with one offer in hand, right? We want to pass out either counter offers, try to take the top two, but we'll even give verbal talks to a lot of people in those maybe lower price points or not as clean offers. Because what we've realized in our experience is that a lot of the time, the best buyer that we actually have in the group, might have not been in the top three offers. They just needed to be given that chance to step up. And so we've actually seen people at the very bottom, just because they didn't expect a house to go as high, step up because they really did love the house. They just weren't ready for that price point yet. So it can really make a large difference when it comes to those offers, right? So, I mean, we've even seen lowest come 250K above the highest offer. There's always a better scenario that we can go with across the board, and understanding on the buyer's agent side too, what those clients are looking for, what's important to them, right? So the other thing that we can work into here that I wanted to mention as a seller, something important to note is that this is where we can also try to get like rent backs. Say you're trying to move out of the house and you need a little bit of extra time, right? We can get like a month of rent back or something like that. Okay. So moving on from there, we're going to talk about understanding terms and conditions, right? So we talked about this. We're going to have a few contingencies, things like that, rent backs, closing time, right? We really want to lock those in. The most important thing here to understand with contingencies is we have three general contingencies: a property contingency, an appraisal contingency, and a loan contingency. Property contingency is the one that keeps the buyers most protected. So from a seller standpoint, our goal is to make that as short or eliminate that in total, right? So that becomes really important with the property contingency. We always like to joke when it comes to that property contingency, right? It's pretty much the one that says, hey, the house looked funny at me today. I don't want to buy this house anymore. And buyers can back out, right? They can do their additional inspections, everything like that. Appraisal is a situation where if it doesn't come in, we can move past that. Loan is dealing with the loan. So moving on from there, then we just take it next. We go D-stage, take everything out of the homes. We've got an accepted offer at this point, so we keep moving forward. Then we tackle the sign-off, which is just making sure all of our numbers line up on the net sheet. Things are as we're looking for them. There's no funny business going on. We get to move on from there. And finally, we get to closing. So at that point, hopefully you get to chop back, open a bottle of champagne, and actually celebrate and hand your keys off and move on with the next stages of your life. So that is so much information to be packed into all of this. Typically, this conversation usually lasts an hour to an hour and a half when really sitting down. So there's always more to dive in if you have questions, and there's things that we can make a little bit more clear one way or another. So with that, I'm going to be hopping it over to our next speaker today. It'll be Adam Bouzmaha, and he's going to go over effective marketing strategies. There you go, Adam. Good luck.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah. Let's see if we can get this camera over here. Do the little wavy thing. Oh. Wait for it. Up here. There we go. Okay. Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So much amazing information shared there. And again, if you guys have questions or anything, please be sure to drop those into the chat. And I'm going to be talking to you guys about effective marketing strategies. And there's been like a misconception, especially here in our area, that you just put a sign in the yard, you put the house on the market, and it's going to sell for a great price, right? Not so fast. Our system and what we have found to be the most effective strategy is something that I refer to as land, sea, and air. And that's really just a full attack on prospective buyers. There's the old school method of knocking on doors, doing open houses, sending out postcards, right? And you need that because that goes to a certain audience. But you also need to be well presented and well positioned online. Things like high-end video, drone footage, professional photography, retargeting ads, Matterport tours. Those are those 3D tours you can walk through online. That's what brings people in, and that's what you're going to use That's what buyers are going to use to qualify you, right? Because everyone starts their searches online these days, as we know. And you need a balance of it all, that old school, that new school, again, land, sea, and air. When people buy a home, and it's super important to remember this in your marketing, is that, and keep this in mind with whoever you choose to work with, but they're not just buying the property, right? They're not just buying the walls. They're buying the neighborhood lifestyle. And what does that neighborhood bring them, right? Buying a house in Cupertino is different than buying a house in Gilroy, and those are going to be marketed differently. People don't buy a house because it's a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2,000 square feet, yada, 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 right? They buy because of lifestyle. I want my kids to go to ABC schools, right? I want to be walking distance to XYZ park or shopping center, things like that. I have good friends in a certain neighborhood, and I want our kids to grow up together, right? These are the reasons why people buy. So keep that in mind with your marketing. The focus should be the neighborhood and the lifestyle, right? And we want to highlight those things. That's super critical. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that there is an element of luck involved, right? Sometimes it happens that the week you go to market, you find the buyer who loves that neighborhood, they love the home, and they've been outbid on several homes, and they're not going to get outbid again, right? We call that kind of like the unicorn buyer. Sometimes it's the flip side, where that buyer doesn't show up week one, maybe it's a couple weeks out, and that's okay, right? You hold tight, you don't panic, as Shannon mentioned, you wait it out, you find the right buyer, and you go from there. The other thing to consider is sometimes the news can play a big role, right? We talked about last spring, usually when we see the market appreciating, we got the news of the tariffs, right? The springtime is usually a great time to list your house. We see things really shooting up then. We got the news of the tariffs, and we were there. Open houses were a ghost town, and it was kind of a tough time to sell. We still sold. We got great results. It just took a little bit longer. And in this area especially, we are so sensitive to media headlines and how those affect the stock market, because a lot of people's down payments come out of the stock market. So it's really about leveraging expertise, balancing those old school, tried and true methods with the new school that I talked about, land, sea, and air, and a little bit of luck. But as long as you cover all your bases, you leave no stone unturned, you have massive marketing and exposure, you're doing everything you can to get the best results. And then I'll leave you with this lastly, but when you're considering who to work with, really do a deep dive, right? Who are they? What's their experience level? Do I feel good with this person? Do they have my trust? What does their YouTube channel look like? How many views are they getting? What does their marketing look like? How many listings have they taken? For example, our listings get on average between 150,000 to 200,000 views per home. That's exposure, and that's a big part of what really matters. All right, I'm going to shoot it back over to Chris, and he'll be right up.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. I think he really hits it on the dot when it comes to that. I'm just going to follow him over there. Let's get back over here. There we go. It's really going to get into the same idea of marketing really does make a huge difference across the board, right? So it's not just throwing that sign up. It's not just throwing up on the MLS. There's a lot of different factors that come into it. So thanks again, Adam, for taking care of that. I think that's always really great information across the board. So with this, on kind of our wrapping up topic here is going to be, when is the best time to sell? And I think this is always something people consider. We're in an area of engineers. Everybody wants efficiency, the right time, the exact perfect thing, right? The conundrum with that is our area works quite differently than a lot of different areas across that. And we alluded to that a lot when it comes to national headlines, things like that, right? Our area really is different. And so, you know, you're trying to sell a home in Chicago, right? Over in Chicago in the winter, people don't sell homes in Chicago in the winter, right? It's cold. I don't know if you've ever visited. That's exactly what we're looking at. So around here, the nice thing is we've got the weather, and realistically, it just kind of takes a swing a lot with what stocks are doing, especially talks or tech stocks in our area, as well as mainly orientating around the school year, right? So we're typically going to see that. If we're going over a normal seasonality, right, typically we're going to see things start to really pick up for the spring, carry through pretty strongly. And the way that we really like to explain this is once spring hits into case, right, we're going to see a much larger discrepancy between the list price and the sales price. And then as we go through the year, we're going to see sales prices going up, but that list price is getting a lot closer to that sales price, right? So we're going to see that effect start to take place when it comes to the season. So with everything that we're talking about, right, it's going to be a really big aspect on, is it a factor of buyer demand? Is it a factor of those rates, right? And so everything we're seeing says we're probably going to start seeing things build up here in the near future. Since COVID, it's been really hard to understand seasonality. And that's because we saw a frenzy. And then over the last couple of years, right, we saw things cool off a little bit more. And then even this past year, right, one usually we see in the first few quarters is the most transactions we're going to see, right? We actually saw that at the end of the year last year. So it's going to be really curious to kind of see what's going on. It's overall just kind of been a wild ride, right, from what we're seeing. So when we're looking at the current relative conditions, right, that's going to ultimately supersede what we're seeing with the season, right, in that case. So we can really expect smooth and steady this year, right? Mortgage applications, we're seeing those signs ramping up. And we're starting to see sellers get comfortable with that rate lock effect like I'm talking about as we hit 6. Once again, it is a fool's errand to try to guess what interest rates are going to do. We have so many factors affecting those. But once again, as we know things now, if we see any slight changes, slight dips, that's when we see those buyers start to really enter the market again. So that is really what it looks like when it comes to seasonality. And sometimes it's just luck, right? Sometimes we just have to take what we get. We had a really great example of a client, and we talked about this earlier. Condos and townhomes have been struggling a bit more compared to single family homes, right? So we're waiting for that rubber band effect to really come back. But in this case, he had a house in San Jose, condo, right? Nice place, right? Something that like a nice young professional would look for, but affordability was kind of an issue, but we wanted to test the market and give it a go. We gave it a go. In that period of time, we saw 4 other homes come up on the market in that building, right? And so at that point, we're getting people to come through the house, just nobody's biting. So the client themselves was very happy with everything that we talked about, keeping updated on the market, right? And we decided, hey, you know what? Right now probably isn't the best time to sell. Not everybody has that convenience, right? To just pull back and, sell at a later time. But in this case, we're like, hey, it's probably not going to wait, or it's going to make more sense to wait or not sell right now. So let's see what happens when the market kicks back up, right? So likely with that client, we'll probably take on the next market, keep a pulse on it, and come back to market in that aspect. So that is really what I wanted to drive home today on seasonality. So with that, that kind of wraps up a lot of the main things that we wanted to talk about today. So I did want to go into what we've got coming up next. We've got a couple of our future events. So our home buyer workshop, we've got scheduled for Thursday, February 26th. That will be solely online. So there, of course, very similar to what we did here with the seller workshop, but it'll be mainly buyer type of stuff. So maybe you're a seller considering buying. This could definitely be for you one way or another. And our very next spring home seller workshop is going to be announced coming up. So if you want those announcements and everything, stay up to date. We've got a website. We post updates on our YouTube all the time and go from there as well. So to hop into our YouTube as well, we are very proud of this, but we were actually one of the highest, if not highest watch real estate channel in the Bay Area. So people appear to be liking what we're putting out there. So if you want to go check out and see tips, tricks when it comes to selling, we have so much great information up there. We've got replays. So please go check that out. I really think it would help, especially if you're the self-learning type, right? Really want to dive in across the board. So with that, I will open it for Q&A, see if anybody's got any questions across anything that we've come, or any questions that we've come across, and then move on from there. But before we hop into that Q&A, I do just want to say one thing that we'd like to offer out here to you is we love to personally walk through your home, discuss strategies tailored to your situation, right? If you're considering selling in the next 6 to 12 months, let's just set up a time, try to figure out what makes sense to you. The most important thing that I just want to drive home on this is we understand everybody's got different styles. Everybody's got people that they prefer to work with. If you walk away from this more knowledgeable, feeling better to take on the market, I think that's the thing that we're really going for, and that's what we want to drive home for you. So my team and I will always be here to talk with you afterwards. And if you're online, once again, we're committed to guiding you down the road, continuing this conversation over a Zoom call, coffee, whatever that may be. So just throwing it across the board, I want to not congratulate, but say thank you to everybody on our team today that spoke. Shannon, Adam, the other people on our team that made this possible. We've got Marita on our team, Farnaz, Justin, right? Once again, we've got people across all backgrounds, psychology, business, interior design, past contractors. So we got all the information that you're looking for one way or another. So with that, I'll wrap it up. We'll hop into Q&A for the people that are here. We'll make sure we pay attention to the comments online. And thank you again for joining the Home Selling. All right.